Well, you have this new book coming out, Touching the Jaguar, and it's interesting to me because I know books, you tend to be working on a book about 2 years before it comes out, sometimes before. So the prescience of the timing for this book is uncanny now, given we're right in the middle of this coronavirus, this lockdown experience, and Touching the Jaguar is all really about transforming our fear into action. We've been in that state and that need as a world for, the last decade or two for sure, but I think never more so than now. So I'm just curious for you, what's it like for you knowing that this book is coming out right now in the middle of more evidence than ever that we need change?
Yeah, it is uncanny, Lee. Of course, when I wrote the book, I had no idea that we would have this particular viral attack right now. But what I did know is that we'd been experiencing hurricanes and fires and earthquakes and tidal waves and other once in 100 year events every year or so, very frequently, for some time. So I knew that Mother Earth, Pachamama, was speaking loudly to us. And you can look at that from a completely scientific standpoint, that, people in China today can see the stars because of the virus, because Pachamama is speaking to us. Or you can look at it from a shamanic perspective, that this is a living Gaia that actually is speaking to us. In any case, when I wrote the book, I knew all that was happening. I knew we'd created a global governmental social economic system that many economists are referring to as a death economy, and that we needed to transform it. And that to transform it, we could use the shamanic technique of touching the Jaguar, which we can get into. And as it turns out, it's the perfect technique for people dealing with whatever they're dealing with around the virus, around self-isolation and so forth. And also for understanding that this virus is just the latest and perhaps and absolutely the strongest, the first totally global message that Pachamama has sent to us that we must change.
Yeah. And it's interesting because touching the Jaguar in simple terms, from what I understand in the book, can be translated into touching your fears. But you have a very powerful story about you learned the experience of touching the Jaguar through, I believe, a near-death experience that a shaman helped bring you back from. Is that something you could share with us? And
Sure. Right. Thank you, Lee. It is in the book, but the short version is that in 1968, I joined the Peace Corps, and I was sent to the Amazon rainforest, deep into the Amazon rainforest, and what's called Shuar territory, which, the Shuar are hunters and gatherers, or they were back then hunters and gatherers. And it was a very primitive existence, deep in the rainforest. And I got very, very ill in 1969, shortly after I'd gotten there. I was dying. I could barely stand up. In fact, I really couldn't stand up by myself. There was no way I could walk for a full day through dense jungle and then try to find a rickety old bus that would take me for 2 days up into the Andes. It was a very, very difficult journey to the nearest medical facility. I couldn't possibly do it. So I was really resigned to dying. And then one afternoon, this shaman was introduced to me. And he said, I can heal you tonight. Well, I graduated from business school. This is 1969. I'd never even heard of a shaman, but it's all there was, So what would you do? You do it. And that night I had a remarkable experience. He took me into this shamanic journey, really a vision quest. And at one point, I saw this amorphous sort of vision in front of me. I didn't know what it was. And the shaman says to me, and we're speaking in another language, but he says to me, touch the Jaguar. Well, I looked all around like, oh no, where's the Jaguar? There's a Jaguar coming out of the jungle. And then he says, touch the Jaguar. And then I noticed this amorphous field turned into a Jaguar. And I went and touched it. And when I touched it, I heard a voice like my mother saying, the food and drink will kill you. And at that moment, I realized that, I grew up in New Hampshire. I come from roughly 300 years of Yankee Calvinists. We washed our hands a lot. We ate very mild, boring, what I consider essentially boring foods in those days. And now I'm living with people who've never seen a bar of soap. They eat some very strange foods, to my opinion, including one of their delicacies, squirming white grubs that you eat live. It's and nobody drinks water. The river water is it's known to be dangerous because the fact of the matter is it's filled with organic matter, falling trees and dead animals that died upstream someplace. And so the women make a kind of beer by chewing manioc root and spitting it. That sets up a fermentation process, and it's called chicha. And then you can add water to it. It's an alcohol. And you drink a lot of it. It's a mild, by the time after you add the water, it's kind of like a light beer. And you drink a lot of it because you got to rehydrate. And so over a period of 24 hours, you're drinking a lot, small doses. But that night on that vision quest, I saw that whenever I drank this spit beer or ate these squirming white grubs or other foods, I would hear a voice like my mother saying, "Son, it'll kill you." At the same time on this vision quest, I saw how healthy the Shuar were very robust, vital people. The men are all built like Tarzan. They're hunters that carry heavy weights, dead animals out of the forest. And the women were, well, I was in my early 20s. The women were looking pretty darn good. And people will live to be very, very old if they don't die. Infant mortality rates are fairly high. And also, if they might get bitten by a snake or fall out of a canoe in rapids or something like that. But otherwise, they live to be very old. So that night, I realized that the food and drink wasn't killing me. It was my mindset. It was my perception. I'm telling you a very long story here. Cut me off if you need to.
No, I love it because it's your programming versus the way you're going to save your life and break through your programming. No, it's a beautiful story because it's like a story that we potentially can all be in any moment of any day.
Yes, and we actually are. So we'll get into that. But so a couple of days later, the shaman came back to me, and the next morning I was feeling great. And the shaman came back to me and he basically demanded that I become his apprentice as payment because this is a non-cash society. And I'd graduated from business school in 1969, and I had no interest in being a shaman. There was no future in shamanism. There is today, but it wasn't then. But the guy had saved my life, and so I did. And what I learned from him, and then later, as I traveled around the world as an economist, I would study with shamans in Indonesia and Iran and Egypt and all over the Americas. And I would learn the same thing. There's a common thread, and that thread is that our reality is molded by our perceptions. So when you think about it, Lee, there's no United States, there's no England, there's no Canada. There's no culture, there's no religion, there's no corporations, there's basically almost nothing that we humans pertain to or are part of, except as we perceive them. And when enough people accept a perception or codify it into law, it has a big impact on reality. Now, that's the basis of shamanism everywhere. It's also the basis of modern psychoanalysis or therapy. It's the basis of quantum physics. It's the basics of marketing, of advertising, of selling things. It's the basics of philosophy. It's everything. And but this is the first time I'd really thought about that. And the shaman says, to change, to move from one reality to another, all you have to do is change your perception. But there's this Jaguar that stands on what you call the perception bridge that takes you across these realities. There's a Jaguar standing there that scares you from changing. But when you touch, and if you run from that Jaguar, it'll chase you. But if you touch it, it gives you the energy, creativity, and wisdom and patience to change. So in my particular case, the reality is spit beer and squirming white grubs. Perception, it'll kill me. And so it was killing me. And then I saw that on that bridge, there's this jaguar, that I needed to change this perception, but there's this jaguar, which is really my mother's voice or somebody's voice saying it'll kill you, and constantly saying that. But once I touch it, I see that why would this be killing me? Because it's not killing all these people around me. In fact, in current terms, we'd say it was very organic and local. It was totally organic and totally local food and highly nutritious. And so by touching that jaguar, they were saying it'll kill you. By touching that jaguar, the jaguar suddenly turns around and says, hey, no, it's making you healthy. It's good food. And, we can bring that to all aspects of our lives. And that's actually how we move from this death economy, this system that's failing us, into what I call a life economy, a system that we will all want in our lives. We can get into that more later. But the important concept is this jaguar, stands there and keeps us from doing what we know we want to do, need to do, should do. But when we touch it, we give ourselves the energy, the wisdom, and the courage to actually change.